welcome back to Explain It Like I'm Voting. I'm your host, Ollie Hunt, and let's get into our topic of the day. On the last day of February, the US launched strikes against the Iranian regime. They paired their Operation Epic Fury with Israel's Operation Roaring Lion to wipe out, quote, threats of terrorist regimes in Iran, as the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said. This was a big event, and there's a lot that goes into it, and it's still going to be flooding our feeds for a while. So let's explore what's going on. So let's recap what is happening right now. On Saturday, February 28th, the US and Israel launched large scale attacks against Iran. And according to a post by President Donald Trump on Truth Social, the goal of the attack was to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Additionally, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, launched strikes on Tehran, a city in Iran, killing the current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In retaliation, Iran's forces fired missiles at US and Israeli facilities across the Middle East. Before we dive further into these current strikes, let's go back into some history because to understand what's happening, we kind of need to understand what already did happen. So let's dive into some historical context. In 1953, there was a coup d'etat, which is a sudden, violent overthrow of an existing government by a small group of people. And there was a lot of Western involvement, which kind of led to this coup d'etat. But the coup was funded by the US and the UK to remove Mohammad Mossadegh from power and restore Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi as Iran's Shah. Now, the Shah gets to pick the new prime minister, so that was the ultimate goal of this coup. They did this because during the Cold War, the UK established troops in Iran to protect it from the Soviet Union. And as a thank you, Iran was like, okay, we'll build this oil company called the Anglo Iranian Oil Company that will give control of Iran's oil reserves to the UK. In 1951, however, Mossadegh wanted to nationalize the oil reserves, which would ruin the UK's guaranteed oil supply. And so they were like, we need to get on this. We cannot let this happen. So they called up the US and they were like, help me figure this out. Like, you guys don't really like them. We don't like them. Like, help me out here. And they started a rumor that Mossadegh was a communist. Along with more blatant disinformation, the coup was enacted in 1953 and reinstituted a pro Western monarchy, which was great for Western countries. But it didn't go over so well with Iranians as Western involvement grew throughout the years. It became almost like a historical grievance, one that Iranians would remember more as foreign interference rather than foreign help. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was in control now. He was the Shah. He brought in westernization and modernization in education, infrastructure. He made sure there was no more talk of nationalization of oil assets. He also formed a special branch to monitor political unrest, which was very surveillance-y, and people in Iran did not like it. But he also started the White Revolution, which was a program of social, political, and economic reform. This looked like redistribution of land from almost like monopoly like landowners to people who would actually use the land for a reason. He furthered the rights of women. He increased income per capita, which is not like everyone's richer. It's just that everyone is making a little bit more money to be able to live. He was also able to set it up so that the oil revenue from their oil company was able to basically fund the entire state. So there were a lot of different things that they started under the social, political, and economic reform. However, this did not go over well with some groups. Some groups thought that granting the rights of women was against Islamic values, and the land redistribution didn't work out for so long as they didn't have the ability to farm because these landowners that they kind of like pushed out were the ones who were giving the farming equipment to the people using the farms. So later, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who was a religious thinker, was exiled, and when the Shah left the country in 1979, he became leader of the new Islamic Republic. He toppled the monarchy and he established an Islamic Republic. So let's recap all of the changes of powers, because this is a lot of domestic policy change. So a 1953 coup pushed the Shah into power, which was authoritarian and Western leaning. Then a revolution happened in 1979, which brought together all the people that hated the Shah and created the Islamic Republic that was led by Khomeini. But in the background of all this domestic dispute is a nuclear program that has been in place since at least 1957. So, during the war with Iraq, Iran started developing nuclear capabilities. In 2003, however, efforts were made to stop this. Iran agreed to halt development as long as they could keep some existing work. So that meant like their supply of uranium, they were just like, yeah, we just want to keep it a little bit. And yeah. And then in 2006, the UN Security Council basically told them to stop lying and actually stop making bombs. Because why would they trust them to just stop and also be like, hey, can we keep some uranium, like, just for funsies? Yeah, they called their bluff. And then, because they actually had to stop building the bombs, this caused the economy of Iran to decline. In the late 2010s, an agreement was starting to be made internationally for Iran to reduce their stockpile of uranium bombs by 95% in 10 to 15 years. This is how we get Donald Trump into the mix of this because he was putting the US into this contract. But then um, he found out that the contract didn't stipulate ballistic missile programs, and Trump got a little concerned that it wasn't stipulating, so he withdrew the US from this UN contract. Then, although the UN contract already had stipulations put on the Iranian government for not following the contract, Trump decided that the U.S. was going to put its own stipulations. And these stipulations, better known as sanctions, are basically like if you don't follow our rules, we will bar people from trading X with you. So, like trading oil or trading goods with you. And this was a problem because Iran was used to doing a lot of business with the US, and so their economy was tanking because of these sanctions. Basically, if you operate in the US, you could not make deals with Iran, and it was considered treasonous, and you could face jail time. So basically, people in the US were bullied into not doing business with Iran. In 2019, Iran attacked a US drone, and Trump ordered a cyber attack and even more sanctions on the country. And then it escalated. The US killed an Iranian leader. Iran pulled out of the UN treaty. They shot down a Ukrainian passenger plane. On and on and on. It was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then they got into conflict with Israel because it's the Middle East. Everyone has beef with everyone. In 2023, the Israel Hamas war broke out, and Iran backed Hamas. So Iran's proxy forces started attacking US and Israeli targets in the Middle East. More airstrikes, more force from both sides. And basically, Israel and the US were upset at Iran for different reasons, and they decided to attack simultaneously. They targeted officials overseeing the nuclear program. They killed Khamenei and wanted the government in Iran to change because Iran has ties to terrorist organizations all over the Middle East. So that's basically, we're at the head of it now. It's coming to a head, and we live every day and see what happens. So that's the story so far, from coups to revolutions, nuclear tensions, and now latest action against that. It's complicated, messy, and high stakes, but understanding what has led up to this is really important to make sense as to why this particular action was so big and such a huge deal. And as always, keep reading your news, keep asking questions, keep listening, and we'll see you soon. Happy spring break, everyone. If you have any questions, if you have a topic that you'd love to know about, drop a comment in the comment section or email us. This has been Explain It Like I'm Voting. I've been your host, Ollie Hunt, and I'll see you soon.